This is the Big Chat Small Talk podcast for dynamic, engaged minds who love thought-provoking discussions about big life challenges in an approachable way. Join me, Bernie Bennett,
and me, Louise Anderson, to challenge your own perspective, to share insights and wisdom on navigating life's demands. Let us have a big chat about important issues in a small talk way. So today is going to be a special episode for Big Chat Small Talk. We will be discussing raising black boys. So raising boys is a unique and profound experience, one filled with love, hope, and the unwavering belief in our son's potential. But as a black boy, it can also be a journey fraught with obstacles, stereotypes, and systemic injustices that threaten to derail their dreams. Raising black boys in Britain comes with its own set of challenges and considerations.
Joining us today to discuss this, we have Aaron Dell, father of two and podcast host of Raising Boys to Men, and Andrez Harriott, singer in the chart-topping band Damage, a criminologist, CEO of TLG, an organisation that works closely with disadvantaged and vulnerable children. Together, we'll delve deep into the joys and triumphs of parenting black boys, celebrating their brilliance, creativity, and resilience in the face of adversity. We'll also confront the harsh realities and painful truths surrounding race, discrimination, and inequalities that we as parents fear may shape their lived experiences. But before we delve deep, we should outline the body of the discussion by first looking at identity. How do we see and value identity in Britain? I think we're going to start with you, Lou.
So if we're talking specifically about black identity in Britain.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion, I think there's definitely been a kind of paradigm shift in how the value of black identity is seen in Britain. I just remember growing up, we used to be kind of pigeonholed in just entertainer, athlete. Now we're seeing ourselves or people who reflect us in different spaces that have opened up. It's taken some probably not so great things to get us there, but I definitely can see that things are moving forward. Are we where we need to be in 2024? Probably not. There's a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Andre? How do you see black identity?
I think there's so I'm going to speak to myself first of all. I grew up being black British, raised in a Caribbean home, Jamaican descent, and born in the UK, so black British. But the age I am now, I see myself as African Caribbean. And I make that distinction because my lineage is African through Jamaica and then into the UK. I tried to be black British, and I often say this when I consult organisations, but England has told me repeatedly it doesn't want me.
Yeah,
Yes.
I get that.
And it means that you find yourself in a bit of a no man's land. There's a term called a double consciousness, which comes from W.E. Du Bois, who speaks about coming from one place, but living in another place as an African American or an African Caribbean, and oscillating between these two positions where you don't really know where you truly sit.
Yeah.
So when I go to Jamaica, sometimes you're not Jamaican enough.
Yeah.
And when I'm in England,
You're not British
not
enough.
British enough. So you find yourself in this middle passage. So in terms of identity, I think identity contributes to a lot of confusion for black boys living in the United Kingdom, which we'll go on to because of what's projected into them about who they should be as opposed to who they actually are. So yeah, I'm African Caribbean, and that's come through a lot of pain to kind of get to that place of where do I truly sit? And I still have a British passport, but I'm African Caribbean.
Okay. Aaron?
See, I find that interesting when you speak about being in the middle, because to me, I'm mixed race. So my dad's side is Jamaican, my mum's English, but I was removed from my dad's side. So my mum raised me completely on her own. So I grew up with my white family and I didn't know anything about the black side of me. So to me, I wasn't growing up believing I'm a black boy.
Yeah.
I wasn't really thinking about race, if that makes sense. But then as you grow, society kind of shows you who you are and you start to see certain things happen and you start to realize, okay, you look at me as this. And I think that's one of the things I figured out quite early on.
I quite like that distinction because I'm married to a white guy. So I do see that there is a difference in the perception of black and mixed race. There is also a treatment that is slightly different as well. A group of black boys versus a group of mixed race boys. I think the treatment and perception, less aggressive, is something that my son faces. But I do like the distinction between how you've now decided you're going to reside more on the African black side and how you didn't quite fit. Well, it's not even that you didn't fit. It was told to you what you should be because you grew up with your white mother. Yeah. And so that wasn't instilled from day dot, which is actually, again, really interesting, because are we creating fear as mothers, as black mothers, in our children when we grow them? Because that's not a fear that you had. It was something that you were told when presenting to other people in society.
And I think, just to add to that, it's also just echoing what you were saying about the journey that it took you to get to the point where now you describe yourself as African Caribbean. I understand that because my background, I'm a bit similar to you, I'm mixed, but my father is Caribbean, my mother's from Mauritius, so two separate sides of the world. So yes, there are similarities and intersections there too, but there are so many differences. There were differences in how my mum's side of the family would do things as opposed to my dad's side of the family. And then also my parents separated when I was young. So a lot of the influences that we could have had from my dad weren't there. Yeah. So I had to go outwards to find more about my Caribbean heritage, especially the Jamaican side. Now, with that, I grew up in a culture where we celebrated ethnic diversity. So I didn't have a problem with saying that I had African heritage because in Mauritius, you were either Creole or you're Indian or you're Chinese, you're Islam. There's like a multi-ethnic island. So that was always the focus. It's only when dealing with British history, it was the term black that was used for everything. And it was like an umbrella term for everything. And I found that to just be an injustice because as a peoples, especially as a peoples from African heritage, we are so diverse.
Yeah, of course.
Culturally, ethnic, like languages, the amount of languages from that continent alone. Yeah. And I felt that in Britain, it was so overlooked all the time. And it was just oversimplified.
So we have one of the challenges we have, and there's something even in the way that we're talking about raising black boys. You cannot use a homogenous term to describe billions of people. So we talk about Africa like it's a country.
Yeah. Oh, I hate it. I really hate it.
And also when we talk about the Caribbean, you know, being Jamaican, I have people in my family who are Trinidadian, Grenadian, or Bayesian, and we are different. So when we say raising black boys, I almost think we need to be talking about how do we raise boys from Africa and the Caribbean within a British context. Rather than use homogenous terms like we say Eastern European people. And I always say, they're not Eastern European people. They're Romanian, they're Lithuanian, they're et cetera, et cetera. You have to give people their due and understand there are cultural differences as opposed to this one homogenous blanket term.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that contributes to challenges of identity as well. I'm Nigerian, you're Ghanaian, you're from Sierra Leone. It's different. There's different cultures, different practices, different languages.
And picking up from then, it's almost like that word BAM.
Yeah.
That bugged me.
Well, thank God they've stopped using it. You know, it was overused and it really never had a place.
No.
And BAME or BME, anytime people saw it, it really was used in a lot of governmental, you know.
NHS.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it always made me feel uncomfortable. Because you were saying people from South Asia, East Asia, Africa, Caribbean, anybody who's non-white,
put them all together.
Yeah.
And it did a lot of harm. We're recovering from now.
Well, it's another form of marginalisation.
Yeah.
So again, it's like saying, well, that's in the BAME community, so that's your problem. And that seems to be always the crux of the debate every time we talk about race in Britain. That's that problem. It's over there. So if we package it like that, it can be dealt with separately because it's not mainstream. And it's a denial process, actually.
Yeah.
I consider it a denial process because it is mainstream. It is in Britain. It is happening in the culture. So do something about it, because I don't have a leader in the BAME community that I've voted in to rule the country. I've placed my vote in an MP in Parliament to do something about the injustices that we're facing. So I just find it's like an easy way for the system to just say, you deal with it. It's in there. It's packaged that way. That's how I see it as well.
So knowing that we've kind of skirted around identity in different ways, and it's really interesting how we've all seen it very, very differently. What strategies have you found, and we can all talk to this, that have been effective in developing positive self-images to embrace their heritage within the context of the British culture? Does anyone want to take that one?
I think I'll take this one, actually. Oh. So my ex is of white European Caucasian descent. If we're going to give it its full term. So my children are mixed race. And colour and race and things. When we decided to have children, for example, we talked about things like race and what we were going to speak to the children about. And one thing we were adamant was we were not going to focus on colour. Because even though we're not raising our children to be colourblind, we wanted them to understand that they were more than just a colour. They were different ethnic backgrounds, there was multiple languages, different kinds of foods, and those were the things that we were going to celebrate. So I had 2 daughters first. By the time I had my son, that really changed for me massively. Because although his dad loved him and he loved his dad, but my son comes from me and I cast myself as a black woman in Britain, and his dad would not be able to teach him how to be a black man in Britain. And at the time we were living in another city, which is predominantly white. And after having my son, I thought to myself, I need my son to have black role models. And I don't want him to learn about black culture and black men through the eyes and the lens of a white surrounding community. And the best way for me to have done that was to come back home to London to be with my family so he could see my brother, my cousins, my uncles who are husbands, great dads, hardworking and successful, because I just wanted to make sure he got to see that for himself. And when he had any questions about his heritage or his blackness, he had people to go to and ask. And I wanted him also to hear the stories of like back in the day, growing up, what we used to do, how we used to eat, how we used to check girls. I wanted him to be a part of that. So for me, I think that was my job as a mother, to make sure that my son can grow up feeling fully supported and reflected in his own environment.
I love that, because you haven't said there that you're able to teach him how to be a man. You're saying I'm aware of the importance and where I need to position him in order for him to learn that. And I think for me, I learned from, like I said, my community. I think my barbershop
that's the best place.
played a massive role. My barber was one of my best friend's uncles.
Right.
So I was going to him from that age of 12. And that was the first real space where I saw grown men having certain conversations. I'm putting my ear to it, probably hearing things I shouldn't be hearing.
Absolutely.
But I'm seeing how men maneuver, how men interact. Yeah. And I started to learn certain things from it, but also TV.
Yes.
For me, I was watching My Wife and Kids.
Yes, my favourite.
Certain TV shows. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the dad I wish I had.
Yes.
Or that's the dad I want to be.
Yes.
And so visually, it's not where I'm being positioned, it's just what is coming into my vision.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have to say that I know for my children, I went out and I bought all the black books that I can find. Because positive imaging and seeing themselves in the books is super, super important. Yeah. So there was a lot of books which were classics, like your Rapunzel, and it would be Afrotina, let down your long hair. That was one. And then the same sort of character, Afrotina, would be the Goldilocks in The Three Bears. So that's what I did. I did surround them with the black images, black dolls for my daughter, black books, and just discussions. And I suppose because not really having a mix, I mean, we've got quite a lot in our family insofar as a mixture, Indian, white. We've got a mixture in the family, but predominantly black. So they had that as uncles and aunts and stuff to kind of feed off, which I thought was another way of making sure they see those positive images.
Absolutely. So it's what you present the children with, which kind of shapes their internal world about what they can be in the future, also what they're seeing around them. I think one of the challenges that I've noticed with black boys is when they're born, they are so beautiful and cute and everyone loves them. They get to primary school and they're starting to become something in the eyes of the society, and they hit secondary school and they become a threat. And this happens both consciously and unconsciously in terms of what society says these boys are. Beautiful and cute. And by the time you're in secondary school, whatever you do is threatening. If you're running down the corridor, if you're in the community with your friends, play fighting in the street, which children do, it's seen as threatening. If you walk into a supermarket, you may be followed by security because your behavior is deemed as threatening. And what's happening is we're kind of eroding their innocence, taking away the idea of them being children. We're forcing them to have to grow up so quickly and exposing them to so many things in society which take them away from the innocence of being a child. The other side of this is that when you speak about My Wife and Kids, I love that because the American TV shows have been great in showing us what stable families can look like, right? There's something I love from the 80s, which I won't bring into this space, but that was a very well-known family, if you know what I'm talking about. Very well-known family. But I must say, for me as a child, I got to see a doctor and a lawyer who were a husband and wife and were raising a family.
We're happy.
And we're happy and went through all the different trials and tribulations. And then we think about my wife and kids. This is a business owner, a phenomenal mother, phenomenal children. And you see the ups and downs, but everybody who's around them, it's instilling in, their young son that this is what black men can be.
Yeah.
The reason we must do that is because it's an antidote to what is projected into children through specific films, media representations, print, radio, TV, about what it is to be a black boy.
Yeah.
What it is to be a black boy in the eyes of the media is no vulnerability, strength all the time, and presenting this outward image that I'm this guy.
Yeah.
When a lot of the men around me, we will show our vulnerability, we show our love, we show those moments. And I think it's really difficult for black boys to find themselves in these spaces, which is why the antidote to what's happening out there is more wife and kids, more shows like this, more black male role models in our communities. Positive, lawyers, doctors, etc. I love musicians and I love sports stars, but we've had that for decades. And respectfully, we still need that.
Yeah.
But I want a lawyer as well. I want an accountant. I want the head of children's social care. I want a clinical psychologist. I want all of these black men to be on display for boys to be able to see.
Absolutely.
So we don't just become football players and musicians. And I say that respectfully because I love football players and musicians.
Absolutely.
But that's all that's ever projected into black boys.
I was going to say, I'm going to pick up from what you said about them being from kids, from toddlers, preschoolers, going into secondary school. Because there was a Yale study, we talked about it in one of our earlier shows, a Yale study, you might know it, in which they were talking about implicit bias, in which they got a group of teachers, a group of kids, black and white teachers, male and female, black and white students or preschoolers, male and female again, and they put them in separate rooms and said, look for challenging behaviour to the teachers. And they put them in front of a monitor. And let's be real clear, there was no challenging behaviour to view. The kids were impeccably behaved. Yeah. So they put them both in separate rooms. The teachers would watch and look for this challenging behaviour. And what they actually found with eye tracking software that was attached to the monitor is that they watch boys over girls, that's the first, and black boys. So I think it was about 72%, 70-something% of the toddlers, boys were watched more than girls. And of that 70-odd%, 42% more were being observed, which were black. So basically, they were looking for that challenging behaviour and their eyes were going to black boys like so many times.
Like a default.
Yeah.
It was just default programming.
And then what that actually suggested to them, that could actually explain the amount of exclusions and expulsions. Because if you're only looking for it in a group of kids, you're going to find it. Children misbehave across the board. But if you're looking for that challenging behaviour, you will find the odd one or two in the ones that you're actually looking. So they leave preschool, going into secondary school with effectively a little record, a little placard that goes on to the next school to say this child has challenging behaviour.
Absolutely.
And that moves on to when they do something, it's almost escalated immediately. So I get what you're saying.
But that lens that is developed in primary school or even in nursery is then replicated in communities, how they're viewed by the police, how you're then viewed in an organisation as an adult male, that for whatever reason, your behaviour, which can be you being assertive in a corporate space, can be deemed to be threatening.
Yeah.
Aggressive.
That lens comes all the way from that age right through to follow us as adults.
And then they need to put in, sorry.
So we're saying colour before character?
100%.
Yeah. That's what they see.
Yeah.
They don't, it's not a chance, is it? You're not given a chance to speak. It's what they see. Yeah. Okay, we'll adjust how we're going to respond to you.
Yeah.
And then you've almost got to prove yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
You've got to prove, I'm articulate, I'm educated, I'm this, for them to start reworking their stereotypes to go, oh, this one's different.
So language is really important. And, when we have these discussions, if somebody watches this and says, why are they just talking about black boys? Because all the data tells us that they are disproportionately impacted in most areas and most services, whether it's school exclusions, whether it's mental health in adult years, whether it's criminal justice. So this is not a biased conversation. This is looking at the data that says there is something wrong with the way black boys particularly are seen in society. But language is important. We must teach our boys how to articulate themselves in spaces so character can be seen before colour.
Or if it's not, that your character is able to make up for the disadvantage.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because a lot of what we're discussing is structural issues.
Oh, yeah.
So how does one's character fight against the structural issues? And it's a chicken and egg. Do we build the character, the strength, the will, and the empowerment to keep growing and growing and growing to eventually change the structure? Or does the structure, the system, have to change to then allow the empowerment? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's both.
It's both.
It's
yeah,
both.
It's
So
both.
an example of both. So when I consult organizations in that side of our business, I'm helping people to think about institutional and structural racism, things that happen that are conscious and unconscious. Yeah. So that's where we tackle it in that area. And that's in a school setting, you know, how you assess the needs of children who have got special education needs, who may be Black but are overlooked, children who have neurodiverse conditions, which may not be diagnosed until much later and just put down to poor behavior. All of those things need to be looked at from a systemic and a structural point of view. Then on the other side, as parents and as families, you have to help these children understand the world they're living in. You don't rob their innocence, right? We don't go too early.
That's what I was about to ask.
We mustn't go too early. They still got to be children. But we can't leave them to just go out into this world blindsided and not understand that, son or daughter, when you step into this space, you do need to manage yourself in a different way in order to have a fair shot at, or a fair bite at the apple. I'm being really simplistic, but you have to teach them skills to safeguard and protect them. And that's about them understanding, as a Black boy, you're not afforded the same privileges.
Yeah, the same rights. It should be right. Yeah, it should be right to have a childhood where you don't even have to worry about that.
Yeah.
You can run free and be a child and you'll be treated like a child.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a privilege to be treated as a child, as a Black child.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to kind of really home in on that, because it should be just a right to be a child.
Yes.
Again, in 2024, isn't it a sad state of affairs that we still have to keep doing this?
Yeah. But you were going to say I think you were going to say that we have to be careful about how early we introduce this to our boys.
I think it's, where is that sweet spot?
Yeah.
I think we have conversations. I mean, growing up or becoming a dad, I was always focused on the birds and the bees.
Yeah.
When do I have that conversation? And then you have parents thinking, do I tell my child that Father Christmas isn't real? Like you have certain conversations, but do you feel that topic of, all right, when do I have that conversation, where there's enough parents that are aware of that? Do you think it's fitting into the conversations I just mentioned?
Yeah, I think America is far ahead of us in having what they call the talk, because they have a history of Black boys and men dying in untimely manners because they're not taught how to interact with the police in local areas, right? And that's not just me saying that, the evidence is there. I think in the UK context, it is important not to link it with Father Christmas and the Tooth Fairy, but for sure, as you get into adolescence, we have to tell you there are some experiences you're going to have. So I'm thinking, year 7 in secondary school, you need to start thinking about how you manage yourself in a local community, dynamics within your school setting, things you may experience from your teachers, just so children don't internalize everything and think it's their own behavior. They need to understand that there are systemic and structural things, without using that language. There are things which are in your path, and I'm going to show you how to navigate them, so you don't just think it's all about me doing the wrong things. But each parent has to work out when's the right time, if their child's got the emotional capacity and psychological capacity to manage that.
And I think it's important that we're proactive, right? I think
100%.
The issue that I see is that we always wait for an incident to occur and we react to it.
Yes.
Okay, this person's just been killed.
Yes.
Okay, right. We get serious for a moment. It seems to fade down. There never seems to be consistency. So I think proactiveness is vital.
I think about and it is a girl, but I think about the child queue incident that happened, probably 2 years now. 2 years ago now, where a child was strip searched. And up until that point, I probably wouldn't have had to talk to my daughter about how you safeguard yourself on your menstrual cycle at school. We wouldn't have had to do that. But now I've had to speak to my daughter. And again, I know we're talking about boys, but I've had to talk to my daughter about how you manage yourself within, if you're having a sleepover or you're at school, wherever, and it's that time for you, I'm having to expose you to things that I think it's too early to talk to my daughter about that. But that's us now being, kind of reacting to what has happened.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. We have to be more proactive. And as a Black parent, you have to be proactive with boys and say, these are some of the landmines that are in your way. This is how you have to navigate them.
I like the way that you've approached that. I think when I was talking to my son, it was really important for me, when you say that the landmines that are in their way. So I dealt with it from a perspective of looking at race and explaining that this is social construct. It doesn't actually exist. There's no such thing as race. It's not founded on biology in any way. It's something that it's collective socialization has made it something that we have to deal with because everybody's working within these rules. So I dealt with it from an historical perspective by explaining that this race emerged as a means to justify and perpetuate systems of power and privilege. And we see that in colonialism, we see that in slavery and segregation. And from this concept, racial categories were constructed to rationalize the hierarchies that now have power and dominance and to separate us as those that are superior and those that are inferior. So by being able to box race, put it on the table and separate it from my son and say, now we can dissect, analyze, and really have a look at it. I was able to distance him away from the concept. It's really quite a negative concept. Distance him from the concept so that he could internalize correctly that there's nothing wrong with you, that you are perfect. It's the social construct that happens around you that is causing you to have to deflect and readjust. I really thought it was really important to just separate the concept, which is an unreal, it doesn't exist, but we all work within it. The laws work, government, schools, that we all work within this concept of race. I'm probably the most annoying person when I get one of those forms that says, tick boxes, straight line right through. It doesn't exist. So I'm not going to help you categorize me within that. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. I totally agree. I just think, I often say to people, if you cut me and if I cut you, regardless of your ethnicity, the colour's red, right?
Yeah.
So race is a social construct which came from predominantly white men in positions of power. Who created something called scientific racism, where they separated people so they could control and hold and retain power. And I think the majority of people, we see ourselves as the human race. Yes, we do have differences, but we see ourselves as the human race. All one. But once you did that, the lighter you are down to the darker you are, it comes with people being oppressed, the darker you are, and people being given privilege the lighter you are. It's nonsense. But it's there, and it's in our society, and it's in our systems, our processes, our institutions. Yeah. Hence why we have to help our boys to understand some of this stuff.
Navigate it.
Absolutely.
So if we look at another system, so we've kind of looked at education, which again, for me is always a problem. I look at education, I say it's just another caste system. It's another way of dividing, conquering and separating kids. You have your A students, which go on to be lawyers, doctors and all the rest of it. And then you have your D students that don't. And they literally, it's a workforce. It was actually set up to provide a workforce for society. And that's exactly the way I see education. So I'm really on it when my kids come home with homework, especially anything to do with slavery. Was like, okay, this is one man's version. Let's have a look at the other version. And I do take every opportunity that presents when they come home and we talk. Every opportunity is a learning opportunity. So it's not just, there's your homework, okay, get it done, submit it. It's, okay, let's talk about that. I think my son came home from one history lesson and he said, history is for the winners? Or history is told by the winners.
By the victors.
Right.
Yeah.
So therefore, there is another tale to the whole thing. And we need to look at both sides of that.
Yeah. I mean, a powerful moment for me was traveling to Jamaica as a child. When, I'd go in the summer holidays, my mum would take me for a week or two, or sometimes the entire summer. What was powerful was to go to my part of Jamaica and see family members that looked like me.
Yes.
And to hear a history and to see maybe the burial site of my great-grandparents and to see the way they were seasoning their food and the yam that was there and the mango that was in the garden. And then when I came back to England in September for school, I had a backpack of knowledge and information which told me I was more than just being in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And I love being born in Britain. Don't get me wrong, it's a blessing. But I have a whole other history.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't let black boys know. I've worked with black boys who, in their home country, they're royal. They're royal. When they land, there's drivers and 15-bedroom houses and staff. But then they go to a school in London or anywhere in the UK and they're just seen as a black boy. And you have to keep reminding them you live here, but you also have another culture and identity elsewhere. So yeah, I thought I'd just raise that because we're talking about how we help black boys to know that, one, how beautiful and special they are, but two, there's more to you. There is so much more.
Absolutely. And I want to echo that as well, because this is about our heritage.
Yes.
And it's about being proud of our heritage and speaking to it, because, okay, I'm black female, but I remember growing up and it was always about British history and what my granddad did for this country.
Yeah.
And always being made to feel like my grandparents never contributed to this country. And especially when you saw films about the war, it was always, very, again, Anglo-centric focused. And when I then found out about my grandfather's contribution to the war and what other friends within my community as well, their grandparents did from other parts of the world, I thought to myself, why are we not hearing any of this? Because this is our story as well. And I think something about, if we look at America, a lot of history in America, Black history particularly, only just starts from slavery. And a lot of them have no idea about what's come before. And I think a little bit of that has happened to us in Britain. And it's only when you go back home, because I got the same feeling when I went back to Mauritius. I got off that plane and I was like, I'm home. This is the mother country. And you feel it. It's like you feel your ancestors there as well. And it reprogrammed me. Because then when I came back to Britain, I saw my life and I saw myself completely different.
Yeah, I call it, when I go to Jamaica, or I've been to Ghana as well, I take a deep breath of my ancestral air. That's what I call it.
I love it. I am home.
I'm home. And then it fills me up again to come back to England for another year or whatever, and I can then navigate space again.
See, I always felt disconnected because I had no idea what that side was. And I know there's a number of interracial relationships out there where Black boys are being raised by white women.
Absolutely.
And that white family. And how do we connect to that side? So I remember, even you mentioned food. I remember being with some of my friends when I was in my early teens, and they would mention certain dishes. And I'd nod along like, I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But I genuinely felt out of place, and frustration kicked in as to why is my dad or why is that side of the family not teaching me this, because my mum can't. So I just think it's so important that in those situations, we make sure that even if we're not with the mother of our children, we are still there for our children to teach them about where they come from and where we come from.
I mean, we're talking about Black boys, but we are so behind in talking about mixed parentage boys and girls and the right language, because I hear us saying mixed race. I hear some people say dual heritage. I hear some people say mixed parentage. I think you should get to own how you describe yourself. But I also think in my career of working with, lots of boys from mixed parentage or dual heritage backgrounds, one of the dangers is when they don't have equal input from both sides, they can adopt negative stereotypical behavior of what they believe it is to be the Black side of them. They can adopt negative stereotypical behavior of what it is to be the Black side from what the media tells them.
Exactly.
And sometimes they can reject the white side because they don't completely feel connected there. So again, they oscillate between the two. Where am I? And it's important to have both, because they're both beautiful and both special.
And both you.
It's a combination. But I just think professionally, institutions, organisations, we're still grappling individually with what it is to be mixed parentage, mixed race within a British setting. Schools, and the institutions are way behind, way behind.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted my son to be raised around my family, to see those role models, to have the narrative come from his, from my family, from our community, rather than what he would be picking up or hearing from the media, for example, or seeing in popular culture. That was really important for me, because I just think it speaks to you in a different way. Like you were saying, it's like an anecdote. It sets in early and you grow with it and you learn with it. And especially when you're going through your learning pod era, especially teenage years, it gives you the tools that you need and those voices in the back. Because I remember as well growing up, and I'm being a woman, obviously I'm not a Black boy, but I remember growing up with my uncles and they were strict. They were really strict. And so therefore you didn't do certain things because you knew you were going to get it if somebody, definitely was going to have a talk with you. And it's just instilling that, just strengthening your voice when you're out there. So then if somebody is trying to encourage you to say, do something, that there's somebody in the background who's going to give you some strong words to discourage you from ever doing that again. So and I thought that was very important for my son to have that.
It's extremely important. love is love. And, you know, when we produce children from interracial relationships, both people have to talk about how we're going to raise these boys. What's important
before they're born.
Before they're born.
I know it's something that people don't think about. They're like, I'm in love, let's have a family. No, it's before you're born.
We're dating.
Intentional conversations.
Yes.
There we go. So we're dating and this is looking really good.
Yeah.
We're 6 months, a year in. If we fell pregnant, how are we going to raise a dual heritage mixed parentage child? What are your values? We got to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Nobody really is. Because like we're saying, you're in love, you're not thinking of those problems until the problem happens.
Yeah.
And then you become reactive. I think we proactively did. And I don't know why we did. We just did it because I suppose it's something that was important to me. But then now what's happened is that with my children, they're now questioning, are we black or are we this? And what are you, mum? And so on. So it does have another knock-on effect because for, you know, like I had said earlier, we didn't want to focus on colour. We wanted to focus on culture and language and food and different ethnicity. But now because of the, you know, our children are finding themselves in their friendship groups where then they do focus on that.
Yeah.
You know, are you black? Are you light-skinned? Are you Latino? Are you this? And so now my children are coming home asking all of these questions. And I'm like, I don't know how to approach it.
Yeah. Societal pressures, again, remove the blinkers for children. You know, some of my best friends in primary school were white and I was black and I saw myself as Andre. They saw themselves as who they were. It was only the parents that let us know we were different.
Yeah. Other people, the outside.
When you turn up to your white friend's house to use the toilet and they say he can't come in.
Oh, no.
And then you realise, so there's, he can't come into the house, son. And then you start to realise that there is a difference. So I understand
and it actually teaches the white boy as well, because before that incident, it was just Andre.
Absolutely. So you have to again, this is all stuff we have to tell our children. You can't leave them out there in this minefield without giving them the tools to navigate it, or it can have a deep psychological impact.
And it's crazy because I look at my youngest who's 10 and he just plays amongst his friends. Like, there's that innocence that we spoke about. There is no difference. And like you said, at some point through what they're taught or spoken to, they start to look at their friends as we're different here. Like there's a threat here, or you just start to look at someone a bit different, and it's sad.
So I think all that's been said, now that we know where we're at with a lot of things and we know that there's still lots of work to be done. So how do we go about then like building this resilience within the community and rolling out despite all the challenges? But is there hope? Because considering how we grew up, I think there's been a lot of change, definitely, but there's still work to do. So how do we now try to move forward and make sure that we continue to make the change and we continue to see better, especially for our black boys, getting to a point, because this is what I would like to see before I die. A black boy can just be a black boy, just be a child. Don't have to worry about these things.
It's probably a lot more complex than what we can actually deal with today. I know for me, I looked at it and I thought, I'm a nurturer. I'm providing my son with the best schools, the best education. We live in the right postcode. He has organic food. He's got, his financial life future is all, set out, laid out for him. And yet, no matter how elevated I can make his world in this society, I am faced with the reality that my inability to give him the complexion for protection hinders him and places him in the firing ring for disadvantages, for discrimination. So I've laid everything on the table. I've given you all, and yet we can't avoid this. It's a really complex issue. I was going to say not even one that government, but I don't even think they're making an attempt to do so, to be fair, because some of the laws in which they're passing is just compounding the issue. I mean, the stop and search, I think that should be long gone. There are some benefits that you can look at and you say, it's okay, you're catching some crime, but how much damage are you doing by stopping our black boys proportionately more than any other group?
Well, it's the racial profiling, isn't it? That's where...
Well, a significant portion of stop and searches end up in no further action. Nothing happens.
But the impact on that individual.
The trauma and the psychological impact of being stopped in your local community, maybe being strip searched, which we know there's an overrepresentation of children who've been strip searched from minoritized backgrounds. All of that stays with you. So then you develop a negative experience towards the police. And you have this embarrassment about being stopped and searched. We do need to have stop and search. but it has to be intelligently done.
Yeah.
But what happens is it becomes a blanket response in a geographical area, and it sweeps up innocence and innocent children, and it really changes. It makes them feel so vulnerable. It changes the way they perceive their own safety and their own community. And I always say, look, if you live a legal life, the police work for us. They police by consent in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. But what happens in those interactions, it puts fear in children about what the police are there for, and it changes the relationship dynamics. There's a power imbalance, and children grow up thinking it's all negative.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody breaks into your house or steals your car, you have to call them.
Yeah.
So we have to, reshape the way children understand that part of the system. But then that part of the system has to respond in a child-friendly, child-first way. So, yeah, whenever we talk about stop and search, it becomes another minefield. It has to be done, but disproportionately, black boys are caught up in it. They really are.
And then they want you to join the force, and you're going, but you're not projecting the right imaging. You're not giving black boys the right feel about that particular department for them to want to go and join.
Yeah.
And I think we need more
Definitely.
people of colour.
That's the thing. That's where you, under the banner of inclusion, you have to create the inclusivity.
Yeah.
Then you'll get the diversity. And until you get that bit right, you're just not going to see that in leadership within the police, because I actually agree with stop and search. I think we need it. We can't get rid of it. We need it. But like you said, it's got to be done in a smarter way. And also, I remember growing up, and even, I've got a brother and I've got male cousins. When you used to ask them, what did you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a policeman.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah. I want to be a policeman. Yeah. And then you go from that to, I hate the police.
Yeah. So what changes it?
Yeah.
Interaction.
What changed it? What took you from wanting to be to, do you still want to be?
And I've still got a chance. No, honestly, for me, it was seeing my friends and my circle as to how they reacted to the police and knowing quite a lot of my friends were doing things they shouldn't be doing. So I started to feel like, if I became a police officer, I'd be against
my community
and my friends, or they'd look at me as a snitch or the enemy. Yes. So that's what put me off becoming that. But I think it's so important. One of the things we haven't really touched on is teaching children how to control their emotions. Because we have men out here that can't control their emotions.
100%.
And I think as a child, that's something I struggled with. How do I, when I'm angry, I just act in an angry way. And then I'm angry that I'm angry. When I was upset, I was angry that I was upset. Everything was kind of an anger reaction. Yeah. And then as you grow, you're then faced with different kind of, emotions like heartbreak. Yes. Or job rejections. Yeah. So many different things come into play. And again, how do you handle that? Anger. And then that's what we're teaching our children. So I think as men, as black men, we need to be having more vulnerable and open conversations with our children, working on handling our emotions ourselves, going to therapy. That's something that benefited me a lot.
Yeah, I do think the black community think therapy is just such a faux pas.
It's what's been instilled in us.
Yeah.
So westernized ways of approaching therapy have been tried to be imported into minoritized communities, and it doesn't work. Yeah. Right? Oh, let me pause. That was a big statement. It does work, but you have to redesign and reshape the way a black community understands therapy. Right? Yeah. And it has to be an Afrocentric approach, or a combination of different factors that make it culturally sensitive, culturally relevant, or culturally responsive to the needs of the patient, etc. Yeah. So clinical psychology or therapy is not something that we had within our homes. However, historically, we had that through our griots, men and women who would sit around the campfire and tell stories. We didn't treat mental health with pharmaceutical drugs. We treated mental health with prayer, with dipping in the ocean, with some, specific leaves or whatever it was. Yeah. And I'm saying that because we've grown up in spaces where to have a therapist is you're chatting your business. You don't take your business outside of that.
They don't need to know.
They don't need to know. But the older you get, you realize these people actually have frameworks that can shift you from one position to another. You've just got to have a culturally sensitive practitioner that understands how to do it.
That's key.
And then we got to normalize it between us as men, which the black boys will hear. Yep. It's okay to speak to your counselor at school. If something's going on for you as a black boy, go and talk to them. It's okay, because they see it modeled in us as black men on podcasts like this, where we're saying, show your vulnerability. Go and get therapy.
It worked for me. Yeah.
I swear by it. I have a clinical supervisor. I've had him for 5-6 years. I see him twice a month. And without him, I would have imploded.
Yeah.
100%.
So you consistently
see him. That's just something that is paid every year. I have to have that because I'm at the coalface of trauma in a lot of the work that I do. Mm-hmm. But also as a black man navigating British society, I need another man or a woman who's going to help me understand what's going on for me historically, childhood to adulthood, and help me keep navigating these spaces every day.
Because you know what, as boys, what's the thing we want to do as soon as we get to a certain age? Go gym.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does gym do? Increases that testosterone but we don't do anything for our mental.
No.
For our physical, yeah, because we want to show the world how big we are, how strong we are, and impress women and so on. But we're doing nothing for our mental.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's interesting because nowadays, because I think, where are the safe spaces for men anyway in general to be able to have that talk? Yeah. And especially as black men or raising black boys, where do they have that safe space?
Yeah.
Because if you think growing up in London now, you can't play outside. There are no ball games.
Yes.
They've restricted play areas. Mm. There's also this idea of stranger danger outside. Yes. And then we've got concerns around gangs and knife crime.
Yes.
So where can our black boys find a safe space to have these discussions, to be able to be open and vulnerable? Because, you know, I remember growing up, loads of youth centres everywhere. Now, where are the youth centres? Hardly any. There's hardly anywhere.
So the money's been stripped out of local government, as we know, over the past 13 plus years. And the consequence of that is we have limited spaces for all children, but in particular black boys and girls to go to speak about what's going on for them. The youth club, you say the barbershop. Whenever I sit in the barbershop chair and I just go to get my beard lined up, right? But it's like a counselling session.
It really is. I was thinking the same thing.
It's like a counselling session. It's like the salon for the black woman, right?
Yes, it is.
These are important places. But I think we do have phenomenal organisations nationally who are doing great work with black boys. I'm not going to list them, but you can go online. There are spaces and places where you can get access to these services. But I do think, again, we have to normalise a lot of this. I often meet boys at the end of the line in custody after they've committed quite a serious offence. And the work that we do is trying to help them understand the triggering or the contributory factors that have led to that offence taking place. And many of the things have started in childhood: witnessing domestic violence, mental health within the home, high rates of school exclusion, substance misuse, etc., etc., etc. And it goes on, as well as living in socially disorganised communities where they're exposed to repetitive traumas as very young children. If they can't articulate this stuff, it comes out in anger. And they shift their anger into the bodies of other people, which then can result in a fatality. Children that commit murder that I've worked with, and I'll say this sensitively, they're not monsters. They're children that have committed irreversible mistakes or irreversible offences. But if you go back into their history, as a society, we have to take some accountability.
We're creating it.
For the environments that we're letting these children grow up in, especially black boys.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, where should we go next with this? Positive role models, I think we can move on to kind of round off the debate and make sure we end on a really high note. I know your mentoring does that, and you go into schools, right? Yeah,
so we do early intervention with children who are most at risk of being excluded. So we will target year 6 in primary, which is a transitionary year. They're the oldest in school. They then have summer holidays, and then they become the youngest in secondary. So year 6 and year 9 and 10. These are the years where children are either developing a pro-social attitude or a pro-offending identity, which can lead them down a different path. So we'll go into schools and provide what we call psychologically informed interventions. It's basically helping them understand, boys and girls, what has gone on historically for you, who you want to be now, what kind of role models are out there for you, but also providing a safe and contained space to explore what's going on and talk about it and get that therapeutic support. And we also provide residentials so they can go away and get out of urbanized environments. We take children to the Lake District, to Scotland, and spend like a lot of money giving them the most high-end experience. They've had like a private chef. Like we took some kids from Peckham and they had a private chef in Scotland for a couple of days. It was incredible. But
did they appreciate that?
100%. And what's happened is about 95% of the children that we take away go on to further education and they go into future employment. They're not in custody. Thank God they've not been fatally harmed and they're not harming other children. What it does when you have a private chef is it tells you what's possible. It just tells you what's possible. You know, there's more than chicken and chips, right? We know that, bro, don't we, right? But we need the children to be able to understand, and just through different activities, etc., helping those children understand that education is key. Like, if you learn this stuff, it will make you the money you want in the future.
Yeah.
But you also need a reprieve from some of the things that happen in socially disorganized communities that impact Black boys and Black girls really negatively.
It's aspiration.
Aspiration.
That's the key thing.
100%.
Create aspiration. Because, even if you come from an aspirational background, you can still suffer from traumas or have issues and problems. But if you instill those aspirations really early, it gives you something to work for.
Yeah.
Hope. Yeah. I know I can have, one day I'm going to have my private chef.
Yes, yeah. It's just an experience.
It's an experience.
But also, who are the role models? You said role models a minute ago, right? So, I think of, I'm going to say his name, somebody like Stormzy, phenomenal role model, right? But if you go into Stormzy's team, they're your role models as well. Black men and women working at an extremely high level to support one of the biggest artists globally. I think of two men who have headlined the O2. I'm thinking of D Block Europe. They headlined the O2 4 nights in a row. In any other setting, people would be really praising what these 4 men have done. I know the Black community do, but I'm saying around those 2 men are role models.
Yeah.
There are men and women who are in senior roles, senior positions, helping these 2 men have 4 nights at the O2. Now, I know I've just focused on music, but then also within local authorities, within clinical spaces, within F1, there are men and women who are Black who are doing phenomenal things. We have to find them and we have to bring them to the children so they can see a visual representation of what it is.
I'm going to say I found one right across from me right here.
Amen.
Because Aaron, I'm just in awe of what I see that you've achieved, and I see you with your 2 boys, and you are a role model. You are showing them what it is to be a man, what it is to be a man of colour, and raising them so very, very well.
I really appreciate that. I always say to my kids, I ask them what they want to be, and it often stumps them because they don't always know what they can be. So one of the things I like to do is go through the alphabet, and I get them to give me a job for every letter.
Wow.
I love that.
Like, try and give me a job that begins with A. Like, accountant, they might not know what that is. And I think we again, in the homes, we need to be having those conversations because they just see the D block. They just see the main characters and be like, I want to be a police officer, I want to be a rapper, I want to be a dancer. Okay, but what about the people that work behind them? It's not spoken about enough. Yeah. So they have no idea they can be.
And believe me, that's deliberate as well, We're being nice here, but they are deliberately not shown certain roles.
Yes.
When you talk about inclusivity, we want diversity and inclusivity, but some spaces deliberately keep minoritized children and Black boys out.
Yeah.
And we have to be real. Again, that's why you help them navigate these landmines. That space is for you. You can go there, but people are going to tell you can't.
Yeah.
Go to the polo and go and see what it's like.
Parents have to be so proactive in doing that.
Be
because it's not
proactive.
being provided outside of the home. So inside of the home, it's exactly what you're doing. And you're giving them the aspirations and the thought process that there are opportunities out there that you might not be thinking about. They're available to you.
Yeah. And we spoke, when we're speaking today. The first time I kind of came across you online, I think what you're saying, Vernie, is important because there are men out there who are learning how to be better fathers based upon what they see on your platform.
Exactly.
No, for real.
No, it's true.
Right?
Yeah.
It's massive.
Yeah, you speak to a lot of co-parents out there. I'm a co-parent myself, and just some of the tools that you use. I sometimes listen and I think to myself, do you know what? That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And I think the work you're doing is really important, definitely.
I really appreciate it. Like, to me, I'm looking around this table and I'm like, look at who I'm seeing. I'm like, this is mad to me.
It's powerful, but in your vulnerability, you are transforming lives, man. And that's incredible.
How important do you think social media is when it comes to raising our boys as well, in terms of what they're now able to see?
It's very important. It's here to stay, and it's a huge medium. So I think, we've talked about this already in an episode about social media.
Yeah. Do you know, I was thinking about the guy that you weren't so keen on. What's his name?
Mr. Tate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't like to call his name, but yeah. Okay. Well, do you know what? I have mixed feelings, and I remain open to what he's putting out there because there is some positivity, and I think the negativity, I'm taking that with a pinch of salt and going, he's pushing buttons just to create more,
more clicks, more people
clicks,
come into it. Yeah.
But one thing that I did, because I know my son watches him, and actually his name came to me via my son.
Yeah.
I was like, right, I'm hearing negativity about this person. So I think, which is what I did, parents need to go and find out for themselves.
Yeah.
So, I follow him.
Yeah. Just to hear what he's saying. Yeah.
And I'm hearing what my child is hearing, and I'm understanding. So when I hear something, I go, right, here.
Yeah.
We need to talk. So you heard that as well. What do you think? And we go through it, we dissect it. And then if I'm hearing things that I'm going, that's a red alarm.
Yeah.
I nearly said my son's name.
I know.
I said, that's a red alarm. Sit down, we're going to talk some more.
So let me qualify why I say I don't say his name in spaces. I've worked with multiple boys, and multiple is not even enough to encapsulate hundreds of boys that have been impacted in a way that I'm having to undo their thinking and language towards women.
Yes.
Towards what they think the world owes them. And yes, we do have some things that he will say that can be quite entrepreneurial and quite inspiring.
Yeah.
But never forget there are things that he's put out there as a grown man, which has triggered boys in particular to think in a certain way. And there are professionals having to undo some of that. We can't locate all the blame in him because it happens through media as a whole.
Yeah.
But that's some of the stuff that I've seen, and that's difficult to see boys talk about women or talk about what they think the world owes them because of what they followed.
Yeah.
And I just want to echo that as well, because you have to unpack the kind of his version of masculinity, because we know that, yes, I think he makes some good points about certain things, but it's that impressionable stuff that he puts out there, which you have to then start unpacking, and then you have to re-educate the boys, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about raising black boys, we're raising the future husbands, we're raising future dads. And that's something that I get as well from your show, Aaron, is the way that you're trying to show your sons, your boys, how to be the good husband or the good co-parent person if you ever find yourself in that situation, and how to tackle these things in a non-toxic way. And your show is really key for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting it out there.
Well, thank you.
So I think I'm going to round this up actually and just say, whilst we can't control the wind, which is society, what we can do is adjust ourselves. And that's what we've talked about by navigating the minefields that our black sons would have to go through.
Absolutely. It's a lovely way to round it up.
Thank you, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Big Chat Small Talk with Bernie and Louise.
Follow us on Instagram at Big Chat Small Talk.